My husband went on a business trip abroad, but his location was set to a maternity hospital. A private investigator photographed his family of 6 accompanying his mistress during childbirth. I transferred 800 million yuan of my assets and canceled all his family's bank accounts. My husband, who returned 3 days later, was devastated the day Daniel Miller left. It was still dark. He was wearing his light gray suit, his tie impeccably tailored, and his shoes gleaming. I, Eleanor, leaned against the dining table, watching him, answering the phone while quietly instructing my assistant to confirm the flight number. Singapore, 3 days, wouldn't cause any problems. He spoke casually. I nodded, simply tightening the combination lock on my suitcase. Don't forget your usual medication, I reminded him. He hummed in response without looking up. The atmosphere between us was always so bland, like being submerged in lukewarm water, tasteless and cold. Before leaving, he made a point of bending down to change his shoes in the entryway. In that instant, I smelled his cologne, stronger than usual. I opened my mouth to say something, but in the end, I only whispered, Be careful on the road. He turned and smiled, a smile as polite as one given to a stranger. As the door closed, the room fell silent again. Jenna was still eating breakfast. She glanced up at me, a piece of bread dangling from her lips, and mumbled, Mom, I feel like Dad's been acting weird lately. How so? I smiled evasively and poured her some milk. He washes his phone every day when he gets home, and he even changed his lock screen password for text messages. She frowned. I don't suspect anything. It just feels strange. I patted her hand, trying to sound natural. Your dad's cautious. He has a lot of work documents. Maybe he's afraid of leaks. She pouted and muttered, Sometimes you're too protective of him. I didn't answer, just silently wiped the table between mother and daughter. Some things can't be said lightly. I know Jenna's intuition is accurate, but I also know that if there's any secret in this world, I'd rather it remain hidden because once it's exposed, life has to turn, and I'm not ready. It's late at night and only a bedside lamp is on in the bedroom. I lean against my pillows, flipping through a book, but I can't concentrate on any of the pages. Daniel had been on a business trip for 10 hours and should have just landed by now, according to his itinerary. I habitually picked up my phone to see if he'd sent any messages. No, when he's on a business trip, he usually sends a arrived text message, even if it's not heartwarming. It's still an explanation. I hesitated for a few seconds and opened the Find My Family app. We'd set it up 2 years ago, a family location sharing feature for safety reasons. I just wanted to confirm he was at the airport and check his flight number. But when the screen lit up, I froze. The red dot wasn't in Singapore, not at the airport, but at Bliss Maternity Hospital. It's a top-tier private hospital in the north of the city, extremely expensive, emphasizing privacy and exclusive services. I stared at that red dot, my heart pounding. I tried refreshing, but the didn't move. I refreshed again, still stuck at the same coordinates. My fingers trembled, and I almost dropped my phone. Maybe it was a system delay. Maybe he hadn't boarded the plane yet. I forced myself to calm down and open social media. He didn't reply. I made a video call. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. The screen flickered, showing a hotel room. He sat on the edge of the bed, his shirt unbuttoned at the top 2 buttons, his hair slightly disheveled. Arrived at the hotel. I asked, Yeah. He smiled faintly. I have a meeting early tomorrow morning. My jet lag is a bit off. I noticed a blurry figure flash past behind him as he spoke, as if someone was handing him a towel. We were still acting. Before I could even speak, I heard a woman's voice, indistinct yet clear. Mom, be careful. Don't slip. My breath caught in my throat. What? I asked instinctively. Nothing. He smiled more naturally. There's some noise from the next room. The noise came in. You should get some rest. He hung up the video call. I stared at the black screen, motionless for a long time. At that moment, an indescribable chill crept into the air, creeping up from my feet. Mom, be careful. Don't slip. Mom, her. Wasn't he traveling alone? Who was that woman? And whose mother was she? The next morning, I barely slept a wink. The woman's voice kept flashing through my mind. I got dressed, grabbed my car keys, and navigated to Bliss Maternity Hospital. Dawn was breaking, and the streets were shrouded in mist. My heart pounded, yet I remained remarkably calm. At the hospital entrance, a security guard stopped me. Ma'am, the VIP area is closed for visits today. I'm looking for my husband. He's here with a patient. The guard's attitude was polite, yet cold. I'm sorry, we don't provide any patient information. I took a step back, pulled out my phone, and casually swiped the screen. On the screen, the red dot was still inside the hospital, marking the exact floor, Building 3, the maternity VIP ward. I looked up at the window of that building. Sunlight streamed through the glass, casting faint shadows. It seemed someone was hanging baby clothes out to dry. I suddenly realized my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from an unspeakable shame. 30 years of marriage. I thought I knew him, but it turned out I even had to rely on an app to confirm which room he was in. I prepared to turn and leave. Just then, the hospital doors opened automatically, and a gust of wind swept past me. I turned my head, and in the reflection of the glass, I saw a familiar figure, Margaret Miller, my mother-in-law. She was wearing a light beige coat, carrying a bag of baby supplies, followed by Kevin, my brother, and Amanda Davis, my sister-in-law. They were chatting and laughing as they walked through the door. At that moment, my mind went blank and my whole body froze. I couldn't believe it. I hid behind a pillar and through the reflection in the glass saw Margaret gently pushing a stroller, a small pink blanket peeking out from inside. Her face was full of smiles, a smile both familiar and strange, like the happiness I had once dreamed of, now belonging entirely to someone else. I didn't approach, nor did I ask any more questions. I knew that nothing needed explaining. That day, after returning from the hospital, I sat in the car until dark. The car windows fogged up, but I didn't turn on the heater. The wind seeped in through the cracks like fine needles, so cold that I dared not move. I stared at the brightly lit maternity ward across the street, my mind blank. That scene, Margaret pushing the stroller, Amanda carrying a bag of fruit, Kevin smoking at the door, flashed through my mind again and again. I recognized every single one of their faces. They had eaten New Year's Eve dinner at my house, said, "Thank you for your hard work, sister-in-law," and smiled humbly. Now, they were with another woman giving birth. I didn't know the child's name, nor did I know what Daniel had said to them. I just clearly realized that, in that moment, I had been completely erased from their world. That night, I called my cousin, Chloe Roberts. She was the head nurse at Joy Hospital. We were good friends. She had lived with us for 2 years when she was a child. "Sis, still up so late?" Her voice was a little surprised. "Chloe," I said, trying to keep my voice down, "could you check someone's admission record for me tonight?" A patient named Serena Johnson. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the line. "Joy." "Yeah." "Obstetrics." "What's your relationship with her?" "I'll find out later." She didn't ask any more questions. 10 minutes later, a message came through. Admission registration. Serena Johnson, 31 years old. VIP maternity ward. Emergency contact. Daniel Miller. I stared at that line of text as if I'd been slapped in the face. Daniel Miller. The name he'd personally registered. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a fact stamped with the hospital's official seal. I sent a thank you, followed by "don't tell anyone." A moment later, Chloe sent several blurry photos, saying they were the ward waiting registration form with a family member signature section. I zoomed in on the photo and saw a familiar name, Margaret Miller. That was my mother-in-law. Her signature was neat and upright, as if she were attending some glorious ceremony. I felt a fire burning in my stomach. I don't remember when I started crying. only that the tears were silent. I dared not make a sound, afraid that if I cried, I wouldn't be able to hold back. The next day, I went to the tea room, sat by the window, holding my cup, but my hands were trembling. Chloe sent me a voice message. Sis, I advise you not to go. It's quite lively at the hospital. The Miller family is all there. They just had their baby's 1 month celebration today. 1 month celebration. I blurted out almost immediately. Yeah, the VIP ward is very secretive. Who ordered the cake? Mrs. Gu. Probably. No. Impossible. It was that young woman's mother-in-law. My throat tightened. I almost choked. The Mrs. Gu she spoke of wasn't me anymore. In the evening, Chloe sent me another short video, a nurse's post on her WeChat moments. The caption read, "Today, the happiest little angel was born and celebrated her 1 month birthday. Congratulations to the VIP maternity ward family." The video showed a beautifully decorated hospital room, a cake adorned with the words, "Welcome baby," and balloons floating from the ceiling. The Miller family members stood in a row beaming. I saw Margaret standing in the center holding the baby, flanked by Kevin and Amanda. Amanda held a fruit basket while Kevin took photos with his phone. Daniel stood beside them wearing a light blue shirt, holding the child and flashing AV sign at the camera. I didn't immediately recognize whose child it was until the camera panned to the bed. A young woman leaning against the headboard, wearing a pink hospital gown, her hair flowing smoothly over her shoulders, smiling at the camera. Her smile was gentle and sweet, as if she had won the whole world. At that moment, I finally knew her name and her face, Serena Johnson. When the video ended, I felt completely drained. I heard my heart pounding, like someone knocking on the door. Before I could recover from the shock, I saw the next post on my WeChat chat moments. A post from Daniel. It was a blurry selfie. The background, a hospital ward. He was holding a baby, his head resting against the child, his smile exceptionally gentle. The caption read, "The most important meetings in life always arrive early." Location, Marina Bay, Singapore. I stared at those words and laughed. But by the end, tears were streaming down my face. He was so adept at lying. His smile in the photo was like a mask. The man beneath it was no longer the man I knew. I opened the comment section. My mother-in-law left the first comment. "My grandson is so lucky." Amanda followed. "Brother, you're amazing. Congratulations." Kevin also left. "Sister-in-law, you've worked hard." The sister-in-law they were talking about had changed. I don't know how I turned off my phone. The world was as quiet as a well. I sat on the sofa, staring at the floor with only one thought in my mind. They all knew except me. I started to recall many details. Margaret's trips to the church for blessings. Amanda's sudden change in attitude towards me. Daniel's company's annual meeting schedule. Everything connected at that moment. It turned out they had been preparing for this all along. While they were welcoming a new life on the other side, I was still at home making soup for them. I remember that evening before his business trip. He specially ate the pigeon soup I made, and he even praised the taste. Thinking about it now, how ironic that sentence was. I picked up my phone, almost dialing his number, but my finger stopped just as it touched the key. What could I say? "Where are you?" He would definitely continue to lie. "Do you have another woman?" He would laugh and say, "I was overthinking it. Is your whole family with her while she's having a baby?" He might remain silent, then coldly say, "Don't be unreasonable." I suddenly felt utterly ridiculous. 30 years of marriage, and I wasn't even as honest as a location tracking app. Night deepened. The lights outside the window dimmed. The flower shop on the corner was closing. I looked at my reflection. A strange face, eerily calm. I didn't become hysterical, nor did I smash anything. I just sat quietly. That quiet wasn't peaceful, but utterly lifeless. My heart felt hollow, devoid even of pain. I suddenly remembered something absurd. Just 2 days ago, my mother-in-law called to ask Chia, "Where's your ruby necklace? I remember Union really liked it. Can she borrow it?" At the time, I just found it strange and didn't ask any more questions. Now that I think about it, it wasn't alone. They were dividing up my life. I clicked on the video again. My parents were holding the child. My younger brother and sister-in-law were smiling and taking a picture together, and the background music was a little happiness. Daniel's smile was so gentle it almost shone. In the last few seconds of the video, he bent down and kissed the child's forehead, and my mother-in-law's voice came from the side. "This child looks like you. His eyebrows and eyes are exactly the same." I almost laughed out loud. They all knew whose child this was, and I, the rightful wife, was kept in the dark and became a laughingstock. At that moment, I suddenly understood a new kind of shame. Not the shame of being cheated on, but the absurdity of being deceived by the whole family in collusion and still having to maintain a respectable life. I had become an observer in their story, a superfluous shadow. I heard the sound of a car outside the window, and Jenna came back. She pushed open the door and looked up as she took off her shoes, asking, "Mom, why didn't you turn on the lights today?" Only then did I realize that the living room was pitch black. I forced a smile. "The lights are broken." She frowned. "Didn't Dad just change the light bulb?" "Yes." I nodded. "He changed it before he went on his business trip." I looked at her, suddenly feeling a little relieved. At least she didn't know any of this. He shouldn't have been dragged into this mess. I said softly, "Jenna, go to bed early tonight." She nodded and went back to her room. I watched her figure disappear at the end of the corridor. The moment the door closed, I finally couldn't hold back anymore. Curling up on the sofa, tears streaming down my face silently, not because my heart was broken, but because I had finally seen things clearly. At that moment, I understood that some truths are more disgusting than betrayal. At 1 a.m., the wind outside rattled against the window, gusting in waves like some silent premonition. On the screen was the Miller family group chat. "Mom's braised pork smelled so good today. Serena's recovery is so fast. The baby is so good. Brother, take the baby out for a walk next time. Don't hide him away. Should we book a hotel in advance for the baby's 100-day celebration?" They chatted and laughed like a happy family. It was as if I, the Miller's daughter-in-law, Jenna's mother, the woman who had been with Daniel for 30 years, had never existed. I smiled softly. The laughter was so faint it didn't even shake the room. My finger slid across the touchpad, stopping at a photograph. Margaret sitting on the sofa, holding a child. Amanda helping Serena Johnson walk over. Daniel half crouching to adjust the lights, smiling and saying, "Come on, one more." The photo was blurry, but the atmosphere was so vivid, joyful. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes. I used to think that what destroyed a family was a sudden upheaval. Now I know. No, it was a group of people who had planned everything in advance, orchestrating every coincidence behind your back, just waiting for you to open your eyes and see them already celebrating. 6 a.m. The sky was just beginning to lighten. When I came out of the kitchen, Jenna was sitting at the dining table, lost in thought. "Why are you up so early?" I asked casually. She glanced back at me, her expression hesitant. "Mom, you didn't say anything yesterday. Did you see it, too?" My heart tightened, but I didn't show it on my face. "Saw what?" She bit her lip and pulled a piece of paper from her pocket, a screenshot of a delivery slip. "Dad's phone rang yesterday, and I saw this text message reminding him that he sent a package from CA Hospital to Xi'an. Did you open it?" She shook her head. "No, but I checked, and the logistics note said newborn massage oil." The air suddenly became heavier. I didn't deny it, nor did I hide it. I just sat down, took her hand, and said, "Jenna, remember what we said. A woman should be smart, not by arguing with her mouth, but by winning with her brain." She stared at me, her eyes reening. "Mom, you knew all along, didn't you?" I didn't answer, just gently squeezed her hand. "I'm all grown up now. I can help you." She choked back tears. "We can't let that woman take everything away." I looked into her eyes. In that instant, something inside me softened. I wasn't alone. That afternoon, I contacted lawyer Jason Anderson. He was my college classmate and had been practicing family property law for over 20 years. I texted him and he replied instantly, "Eleanor, you finally contacted me. Let's talk at the office." I brought a USB drive, having compiled all of Chloe's hospital certificates, screenshots of her social media posts, and signed evidence. After reviewing it, Jason pondered for a few seconds. "This is more interesting than I imagined." He tapped the USB drive twice. "Are you sure you want a divorce?" "Not a divorce, but a complete separation," I said calmly. "I don't fight unprepared battles." He nodded. "Understood. Regarding the assets, I'll help you set up a marital personal trust, which will separate your inherited property and premarital savings. If Daniel gets into trouble in the future, it won't affect you. He will retaliate." I reminded him. "Let him try." Jason's eyes sharpened. "You're not little Eleanor anymore." I smiled. "And not Mrs. Miller anymore." After finishing all this, I returned to the property management office and asked an acquaintance to retrieve all the real estate information under Daniel's and my names. The forms were spread out on the table with clear red stamps. I frowned. Besides the villa we lived in, there were 2 other villas registered under Margaret's name, one in Seaside Gardens and the other in a high-end retirement community in the suburbs. I dialed Margaret's number. My tone calm. "Mom, where's the key to the Seaside Villa?" She hesitated. "Why are you asking?" "Someone wants to rent it." "I'm just checking the market rate." She chuckled. "That's the retirement home your dad left me. Why would I rent it out?" I didn't say anything, just hung up. I knew then this house had long since ceased to belong to us. That evening, I opened the little vault I'd kept hidden for over 20 years. Inside were several old bank books, a few pieces of gold jewelry, and an independent investment card I'd bought years ago. I laid them out on the table. Then I opened my social media, leaving all groups related to the Miller family, and deleting all conversations with my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and Miller's relatives. There was no advance notice, no farewell, just like the day they decided to keep it from me during my childbirth. Silent and cold. After everything was deleted, the world suddenly became quiet. Once a person calms down, their thoughts become clear. I spent 30 years learning to endure, but it only took me 3 days to learn to control. On the 3rd day after Daniel left, I returned to our so-called marital home, the villa. This house was bought in the 5th year of our marriage, initially registered in my name, but later suggested that Daniel be added as a co-owner. Now, looking back, I know perfectly well how many foreshadowings were buried in that co-ownership. Standing in the empty living room, staring at the nails on the wall where family photos used to hang, I suddenly felt nauseous. Their whole family was singing "Happy Birthday" in the hospital, while I was preparing to clean up the mess. "The renovation notice has been posted." I turned to the moving company foreman and said, "We must finish clearing the 1st floor today." "Mrs. Williams." "Don't worry." The movers were experienced and highly efficient, introduced by an acquaintance. They even wrapped the underfloor heating control panel in the corner with protective film. I reported to the property management that the villa would be closed for construction for 2 months due to aging water pipes requiring complete replacement, during which time I would not receive any visitors. All the mahogany furniture, antique ornaments, paintings, and several boxes of documents were packed and moved to a spare storage room at my parents' house, a gift from my father which was always locked and undisturbed. That evening, looking at the empty living room, I suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. This home no longer belongs to them, I whispered after cleaning up the scene. I went back to my study and opened the long-forgotten gift agreement. This agreement was signed the year Jenna was born. Daniel, for tax avoidance purposes, transferred part of his post-marital investments to his child as a gift, listing Jenna in her name and me as her guardian. I hadn't paid much attention to it then. Now, it seemed this agreement had become my strongest shield. I took the original agreement to Jason's office and gave it to him. He flipped through it, clicked his tongue, and said, "This is a treasure. Eleanor, are you sure you want to use it now? If not now, are you waiting for them to come and take it?" I sneered. "Then I won't be polite." He turned and went into the filing cabinet, taking out a new segregation agreement. This contract solidified the original gifted property structure and granted full management authority over his daughter after she reached adulthood. Legally, this portion of the assets would be completely unrelated to Daniel Miller. My hand didn't tremble at all when I signed. At that moment, I was even a little grateful that I hadn't been too obedient all these years, leaving a loophole for me to extricate myself. The next step was the change of trusteeship for the fund. Jenna's education fund account had always been managed by Daniel, with funds being injected on time every year. He had once proudly said, "This is my responsibility as a father." I now understood that his so-called responsibility was just a sugar-coated boast. I went to the bank branch and presented the authorization and family change statement. "We need the spouse's written signature." The teller reminded me with a smile. I calmly nodded. "He's currently abroad and has already sent an email authorizing me to handle this on his behalf." Then I produced the pre-prepared authorization email processed by Jason's team with the custodian's electronic signature attached. The teller glanced at it, then nodded again, confirming the system can be modified. "It's expected to take effect in 3 business days." As I signed, it felt like a knife had stabbed into my heart. Not the pain, but the clarity that followed the cut. From now on, everything for Jenna would be mine alone. Next, I worked on her Social Security and Medicare accounts. Daniel's Medicare account was still linked to our shared address, which was the legal default before the marriage was dissolved. However, the system allowed for long-term overseas assignment of family members' changes used to freeze or relocate medical and Social Security addresses. I used this reason submitting the long-term overseas assignment documents along with a business trip itinerary and a work letter. The system quickly approved the initial review. I successfully temporarily froze Daniel's Medicare and canceled his insurance registration at his current address. At that moment, I understood that even legal actions could be a sharp knife. He let another woman have her postpartum confinement in the hospital, and I blurred his social identity. When he comes back, he'll find he has to pay for his own medical care. And then there's the insurance for my carefully kept ledger. I pulled out 4 insurance policies, 2 critical illness insurance policies, 1 life insurance policy, and 1 family joint insurance policy. The beneficiaries were all spouses or family representatives. I called the insurance agent, Mrs. Miller. "Why the sudden change of beneficiaries?" She asked cautiously. "Nothing. My daughter is grown up. I trust her more," I said calmly. She sent me a form, which I filled out item by item, removing Daniel and all members of the Miller family from the list and changing the primary beneficiary to Jenna. When I signed that document, it felt like I was finally putting an end to all the grievances of the past years. The insurance wasn't about saving their lives, but about securing my Jenna's future. That evening, Jason asked me to sign an independent trust agreement. "Eleanor, this is the final hush money agreement," he said, looking at me. "Once you sign this, if Daniel sues you in the future or tries to seize your assets, you will have no right to do so." I quietly flipped through the pages, the dense stripes cold and indifferent, yet more reassuring than any warmth. "Sign it." I said, "that you're ruthless now. More so than all those law students in our department back then." He remarked, "Ruthless? Not because I'm inherently cold-blooded," I said calmly, "because I was forced to go from being a wife to being a person." It was late when I got home. Passing the kitchen, I heard Jenna practicing the piano inside, playing River Flows in You. Her playing wasn't perfect, but the rhythm was steady like her stubborn. Quiet and radiant, I left her a glass of hot milk in the kitchen, then went back to the study, took out the thick household register, and turned to Daniel Miller's page. I stared at it for a long time. The photo was still of him in a suit, looking refined, I raised my hand and flipped through the pages of paper stamped with red seals until the last page, where I wrote 6 words. This person is no longer associated in this world. There's a kind of cleanup that silently erases the other person from the system. The first step is freezing Social Security. I went to the Social Security Service Hall, sat at the manual window, and took out the yellowed photocopy of Daniel Miller's ID card. The staff member glanced at me, then looked at me again. "We can't process this without him in person." I smiled. "He's abroad on assignment for 3 years now. Each time he comes back, he only stays for 2 or 3 days, and this time is no exception. Last time, he was fined for late payment of medical insurance because he didn't update his suspension status." I said confidently. "He sent it via email." I pulled out a prepared, printed email from my file folder. "This is the assignment certificate issued by my company." The staff member looked at it, pressed a few keys. "Okay, I'll apply for suspension status for overseas workers for you. This way, his medical and social security accounts in China will no longer be affected and will be unusable. He needs to apply in person to reinstate them." "Thank you." I took the application form, standing up with my back straight. After Daniel returns to China, the first thing he'll most likely do is go to the hospital for a medical checkup. He's getting old and his gallbladder isn't good. I'd like to see his expression when he pulls out his bank card and ID, only to be told his account is invalid. The second step is the bank. I've managed Daniel's accounts before. He has a China Merchants Bank salary card and another card linked to a wealth management account. I changed my code, took his old bank registered SIM card, and went into the bank branch. I pressed the queuing button and sat quietly, looking every bit like a woman about to do something less than dignified. When my number was called, I stood up, smiled, and walked to the counter. "Hello, I'm Mr. Miller's family member. He's currently overseas. Please help me change my registered mobile number. We need the person to do it in person," the teller said without looking up. I nodded and took out the pre-prepared power of attorney and identification documents for Daniel, as well as Daniel's phone number, a number he'd used for over 10 years and never changed. This time, I had specifically copied the SIM card and verified my identity. "Please answer a text message verification code," the teller said, following the procedure. I looked down at my phone, pressed answer, and repeated the voice code verbatim. The teller pressed confirm. A moment later, "Data update successful." The registered mobile number became an unused, empty card, a card I had specifically registered, linked to another email address. Now, even if Daniel logged into online banking, he wouldn't receive any notifications. Investment products maturing, insurance deduction reminders, credit card authorizations, all will vanish without a trace. Even worse than theft is a blatant disconnection. The third step, moving out of the registered address. I took the property certificate to the county recorder's office and filled out an application form for voluntary relocation by non-mediate family members with supporting documentation stating long-term non-cohabitation, causing disturbance to my life and affecting my sense of security. Margaret Miller, Kevin Miller, and Amanda Davis. These 3 names were prominently listed. I initially thought the process would stall, but after scanning the documents, the clerk routinely asked, "Are you sure these 3 haven't acquired a share of the property?" Of course. I produced a copy of the property certificate. "The registration is temporary. There's no co-ownership. Then this application will be reviewed and completed in 3 days at most." My fingertips tingled slightly as I signed, not nervously, but with a sense of exhilaration. Did they think they could bind this villa with just a household registration certificate? Sorry, from today onwards, they won't even be able to enter the gate. Next, I went to the villa complex's property management office. I need to change the resident access cards and delete the permissions of the old cards with the following numbers. I handed her a list of all Miller family members' card numbers. The receptionist paused. "These are your family members. They used to be." I smiled faintly. "They're irrelevant now. They need to be re-registered. Only keep my and Jenna's facial recognition. Delete all others. I watched as names were crossed out one by one on the computer screen, the access control system completely disabled. At that moment, it felt like erasing a series of past lives with an eraser. Finally, I applied for 2 new parking space usage rights and canceled the supplementary card that originally belonged to Kevin. He'll be stopped when he drives in, preferably for a long time. After I finished speaking, I got up and left, my steps lighter than ever before. That night, I sat in my car looking at the electricity meter in front of my house and made a call to the power company requesting a long-term power outage. I also applied for a long-term shutdown of broadband, natural gas, and water within a week. All water, electricity, gas, and internet services would be suspended. In my hands, this villa had become a shell devoid of life. They could come back, but they couldn't get in, couldn't move in, couldn't shower, couldn't go online, and even flushing the toilet would be a problem if they insisted on breaking in. The neighborhood security had already been notified. No permanent residents here. Beware of burglary. The final step, the keys. I put all the spare keys into a brown paper bag, attached a note with 8 characters written in my usual handwriting. Wishing you a speedy recovery. Don't worry. There was no message, no signature. The recipient on the delivery slip was Margaret Miller. I went into the neighborhood convenience store, handed the bag to the clerk, and scanned the code to pay. When I saw the delivery dispatched notification, I felt an unprecedented calm. This home, once the embodiment of all my patience and compromises, now it finally belonged only to me. I returned to the empty living room and drew back the curtains. A night breeze rushed in carrying a slight chill. Jenna came downstairs, looked at the night outside the window, and said, "Mom, didn't we go too far?" I shook my head. We didn't make a single mistake. They're the ones who are wrong, thinking we wouldn't dare. She was silent for a moment. Then what will Dad think when he finds out? I smiled slightly. He should be glad I only erased his life, not his identity. I'm not the kind of woman who scrambles at the last minute, nor am I a wife who can turn things around on emotion. I know that dealing with a man like Daniel, who came prepared from the start, a one-off counterattack is far from enough. I need to cut off every path he can take back, from favors to assets, from social circles to evidence. This isn't a divorce. This is a reckoning. The first step is a comprehensive asset audit. Jason sent an email with an attachment of potential asset transfers identified through our post-marital asset tracking system. My heart raced uncontrollably when I opened it. Daniel had 3 properties under his name that were currently being traded. A street front shop in the South Side not listed. The other party is Kevin Miller's authorized agent. A partial title to an office building. Registered owner, Serena Johnson, and a garage property package. The agent is UA Real Estate. Staring at the form, I suddenly felt a pang of irony. It turned out he had been planning ahead all along. I was just the last person in this marriage to know. I dialed Jason's number. Can we freeze it? Normally not. But if you request temporary legal assistance based on suspected transfer of marital property, the transaction process can be delayed. For how long? It depends on the other party's reaction. But in principle, it should be enough for you to complete all the separation. I nodded. Let's do it. The second step was to apply for a freeze with the tax bureau. I went to the tax service center and, accompanied by a lawyer, submitted a formal application for assistance in freezing marital property transactions. The staff member, unfazed, looked at the documents we submitted. We need a document from the court. The preliminary hearing report is attached. Jason handed over a scanned copy of an official letter. We have opened a case for review. The staff member stamped the document with a snap. Then you need to notify the relevant parties involved in the transaction as soon as possible to prevent them from circumventing the rules. I smiled. If they dare to circumvent the rules, I'll make sure they can't even pass the certification exam. Haven't they been plotting against me all along? Let's see whose scheme is more cunning. That evening, Jenna sat at the dining table, staring blankly at her phone screen. "What are you looking at?" I asked. "Looking at that woman's WeChat moments." I went over to look. Her screen displayed Serena Johnson's social media updates, a photo of newly purchased mid-range luxury brand baby products. Caption, "Thank you. Belated love." A video filmed circling inside a commercial building with a real estate written on one side. The background music being a niche French love song. Jenna sneered. He transferred assets under his own name, thinking that way the money wouldn't be able to catch him. I patted her shoulder. "Don't rush. Keep observing. Take screenshots of all her social media posts and save them." Jenna nodded. I also downloaded the original audio from several of her videos. It can be used for spatiotemporal analysis. I was taken aback looking at her. "How did you learn all this?" "Because you're my mother." She looked up and smiled at me. At that moment, I knew she wasn't standing beside me. She was on my side. The day I left the Miller family's group chat was overcast. I first changed my nickname in the group to Eleanor Williams, non-immediate family member. Then slowly typed a message. "Everyone, from now on, there's no need for me to discuss anything related to the Miller family. I have no connection to them anymore. Please do not message me privately." After sending it, no one in the group said anything. 20 minutes later, I clicked leave. The Miller family was never a real family. I was just a figurehead, a decorative vase used to create a harmonious family atmosphere. Only when I left did I feel free for the first time. At noon, Margaret called. She always used the landline, and the first thing she said was her familiar, aggressive tone. "Eleanor, do you know?" I was sitting in the study, staring at the empty wall. "What do you think?" I asked. My tone as light as if I were asking if he'd eaten. He paused, then gritted his teeth. "We didn't mean to hide it from you. After all, it's Daniel's child." I interrupted him. "Are you speaking for your son or trying to find a legal identity for your grandson?" "What do you mean?" I chuckled that if anyone moves into a house under my name again, please give me a heads up. "Your package is here. Please check." I hung up. I knew he'd received more than just the keys. He'd received a notice terminating all his access to the house. The final step was planting a bomb. I turned on my computer and compiled all the evidence I'd gathered over the past few days. I made a private short film using editing software, encrypted it, uploaded it to my private cloud drive, named it The Life of Daniel Miller, and set the permissions to be visible only to Jenna and me. I even added an auto-trigger description. If I do not take any action within 3 months, it will be automatically published to 5 designated contacts. This wasn't just a counterattack. It was survival. In this marriage, which had been hunted down by their entire family, I couldn't give them any more room to turn the tables. It wasn't that I was ruthless. It was that I had finally learned to stop being merciful. It was raining outside. I stood by the window and saw a delivery truck drive in. It was a package for Margaret. He probably would never have imagined that one day he would be kicked out of the home he had always called his own. Jenna walked past me and leaned against the windowsill. "Mom, what's next?" I didn't turn around, only saying 2 words. "Wait for him to come back." She was taken aback. "You still plan to see him?" I smiled. "Of course, I will. I want to see him with my own eyes. To walk into this world that is completely not his. To see how he loses it inch by inch." I never imagined that our first meeting would be in a hospital corridor, and I dressed in a nurse's uniform and wearing a mask. That day, I didn't bother with much disguise. I simply borrowed a spare uniform from a friend's nursing care agency, slipped on medical shoes, and pushed an empty wheelchair step by step into the maternity ward. The air on this floor carried a scent of disinfectant mixed with the aroma of milk. The corridor was spacious, and the warm yellow light made it somewhat dim. I lowered my head slightly, stood against the wall, and held on to the wheelchair handles. My peripheral vision, sweeping across the faces of each woman who came out until I saw her. Serena Johnson pushed a stroller, slowly walking from the end of the corridor. She was wearing an expensive maternity gown with delicate features and a face still showing signs of postpartum swelling. Her hair was casually draped and a frivolous smile played on her lips. She walked slowly but intentionally or unintentionally glanced to both sides, as if expecting someone's gaze. I didn't look away when her gaze fell on my face. There was a moment of hesitation, but she quickly regained her composure. She stopped abruptly as she approached me. "Are you the new caregiver? I've never seen you before," she asked, tilting her head. I pulled down my mask, a slight smile playing on my lips. "I'm not a caregiver." She paused, instinctively glancing down at my name tag, then froze. "You are." Her tone suddenly tightened. I looked at her, my voice gentle. "Hello, Miss Serena. I am Daniel Miller's legal wife, Eleanor Williams." Her face changed instantly, but in just 3 seconds. He smiled again. "Mrs. Williams, you're quite observant, finding this place." I nodded calmly. "After all, you've kept this a secret for so long. I couldn't let you down." His smile widened. "It's all right. The child has a father now. He won't let us suffer." "Oh," I responded softly. "Do you know where he went first after returning home?" Serena paused slightly. I leaned down and glanced at the 1-month-old baby in the stroller, the rosy little face sleeping peacefully. "Quite cute," I said, "but doesn't look like a Miller at all." Her face finally darkened. "What do you mean?" "Nothing." I looked up at him calmly. I just suddenly realized that some people are too eager to grab a seat before they've even warmed their seat. "It's gone." He was about to speak when a familiar, yet nauseating voice came from behind me. "Serena, is your baby grandson awake?" I turned around instinctively. Margaret, wearing a champagne-colored, mid-length trench coat and carrying a limited edition bag, was walking along, smiling as she reached out to touch the baby. She walked with her back ramrod straight, looking more like a socialite walking a red carpet than a newly minted grandmother. When he saw me, he stopped, his smile turning cold. "What are you doing here?" He glanced at me sideways, a sarcastic smirk on his lips. I ignored him. He turned to Serena and said, "Don't be afraid. He's a thing of the past. You're the one who belongs to the Miller family." Then he slowly approached me, his voice low but clear enough for me to hear. "Eleanor, your abdication is dignified and everyone can part amicably." I stared at him and suddenly smiled. "Fine, I'll give it up." Serena seemed not to understand, looking at me with suspicion. I said calmly, "I'm not only giving up my husband, but also my household registration, my bank account, my social security and medical insurance. Now, I don't want to touch a single hair in the Miller family." Margaret sneered. "You make it sound so good, but who believes you're really willing to give it up?" I gently raised my hand, pulled an envelope from my bag, and handed it to him. "This is your household registration cancellation receipt. Want to see it?" His face changed drastically, and he reached out to snatch it. I didn't let him touch it and took the envelope back. "I'll only show you once. Don't dirty my paper." Serena's face turned pale. "You dare mess with our household registration." "I didn't mess with you." My voice turned cold. "You're not a member of the Miller family. Where would you get a household registration?" He froze, as if he suddenly realized something. I looked down at the stroller. "You'd better register the child's household registration quickly. Otherwise, you'll lose it later." He reached for his phone. "I'm calling the police. You're interfering with my postpartum recovery. I'm suing you for defamation." I stood still, only looking at the screen he was pointing at. "I suggest you check your identity information first." I smiled. He opened his health code, but found that the system displayed unmarried, childbirth warning, data not matched, no partner relationship. He was stunned. "How could this be?" he murmured. I took a step closer. My tone as gentle as if I were coaxing a child. "Do you know that in your hospital's childbirth registration information, Daniel's identity has been marked as no civil connection?" He stared at me intently, his fingers trembling. At this moment, A quarrel suddenly came from the hospital's discharge area. What? Your medical insurance has been suspended. You must be mistaken. I glanced to the side. There stood Serena at the nurse's station, holding her discharge papers and reimbursement card, her face deathly pale. Look, this card can't be verified by the system anymore. We can't settle the bill. The nurse explained patiently. I just used it. How could it be? I slowly walked over, standing beside him like an outsider. He looked up in horror, genuine panic appearing in his eyes for the first time. What did you do? I smiled gently. I didn't do anything. I just returned your rightful status to you. As for what you think you have, I'm sorry. What's not yours will never be. His lips trembled, unable to speak. Margaret rushed over. Ella Laner, are you crazy? You've ruined us. I haven't ruined you. I looked at him calmly. I'm just no longer helping you. I glanced at the child in his arms. The child seemed to have been woken, frowning slightly. I suddenly felt a pang of pity for this new life. But sadly, he was born at the wrong time into the wrong family. That day, I walked out of Joy Hospital without looking back. The sky was blue, and the sunlight was so bright it was almost blinding. As I reached the intersection, my phone rang. It was a notification from the property management. Ms. Williams. Daniel Miller attempted to enter the community, but failed to verify his identity, and has been asked to leave by the gatekeeper. I smiled to myself. They thought I would give in, cry, and beg them to turn back as I always had. But they didn't know that this time. I wasn't even planning to open the gate. I stood by the window holding a freshly made coffee, looking at the monitor on the balcony. On the screen, a tired figure stood at the gate of the villa area, pulling a suitcase in his left hand and holding an access card in his right, his face growing increasingly grim. Daniel had finally returned home. He was wearing a perfectly wrinkle-free suit, clearly having just gotten off a plane, his face showing the weariness of a long flight, yet also filled with impatience. Like every time he returned from a business trip, he wanted to swipe his card to enter his home, then collapse on the living room sofa and shout, "Eleanor, why is the air conditioning so cold?" This time, however, he swiped his card 3 times at the door, and the red light flashed 3 times. The security guard approached him and said, "Sorry, sir, the system shows you are not a current resident and cannot enter." He frowned, his voice already trembling with anger. "I'm the owner. This house is mine. Do you even recognize me?" "Sorry, the system shows this access card is invalid." The guard replied calmly. I carried my coffee and slowly walked back to the living room. The TV was on silent mode, the subtitles playing. The strong never show weakness, but the true winner is the one who makes the enemy feel utterly ashamed. How ironic. I knew what he would do next. Sure enough, half an hour later, he called the property management. I had pre-transmitted the voice recording to the cloud along with the call audio and saved it in the Daniel's response folder. "Hello, this is Daniel Miller. I'd like to inquire about the owner information for Villa 16 in Azure Bay." There was a pause on the other end of the line, clearly having been instructed beforehand. "I'm sorry, sir. Due to owner privacy, we cannot disclose this information. I am the owner. Check the household registration and property certificate. Is my name on it?" The other party calmly replied, "Currently, the system shows that this is a private trust registration, and we cannot disclose the beneficiary information." "Huh, what do you mean?" He roared. "Have a nice day." The call ended. I listened to that conversation as if watching a one-man show. He started calling me. My phone vibrated 3 times. I answered, "Eleanor, what have you done to the access control? I can't go back." I took a deep breath and calmly said, "Mr. Gu, my home doesn't accept visitors right now." "What did you say?" "I said that you're an outsider. You've even canceled your household registration. How can you still think you can swipe your card to enter my home? Are you crazy? Do you know what you're doing?" "I know very well." I smiled slightly. "You should also start learning to live in a world after clearing the cache." There was a deathly silence on the other end of the phone. I pressed the hang up button and the phone went silent. Daniel drove to the company. That was the safe haven he had truly cultivated over the years. He had always believed that as long as the business was still there, the money was still there, he hadn't lost. But the moment he opened the office door, the expression on his face changed. The desk was empty. Even the potted green ivy he had specially chosen had been replaced with ivy. His computer desktop was locked, displaying "M.R. Miller. Your account is under investigation and frozen. Please contact the legal department." He slumped into his chair, forcing himself to open his email on his phone. In his inbox, 10 unread emails were marked with red dots. He opened one. In view of the recent opaque transactions involving Mr. Miller's assets and related parties, the board of directors has unanimously decided to suspend all of his investment decision-making authority, freeze his accounts, and await judicial confirmation effective immediately. His head spun. This wasn't a suspension. This was expulsion. It was kicking him, the founder, directly out of the core. He trembled as he opened his social media app and scrolled to my posted just yesterday. Eleanor, from today onwards, my house is much quieter. Even the shadows are gone. The accompanying picture, a cup of coffee, a book, and an empty sofa. She sat in her car, not knowing how long until the sun set and darkness fell, before he finally picked up his phone with difficulty. Someone had sent him an anonymous short video, link titled Mrs. Miller's Speech Compilation, a guide to the original wife's counterattack. He clicked on the video. The video flashed before my eyes. The first scene showed me at the hospital entrance. The second showed Margaret holding her baby, her stunned expression after my calm and collected attack. The third showed Serena standing pale-faced in the corridor, informed by the receptionist that her health insurance had been suspended. Every frame was clear and undeniably real. The background narration was my voice over. I used to be the easiest one to control in their eyes, but from today onwards, I am a past you can't control and a home you can never return to. Daniel abruptly shut down the video, his breathing growing heavier. He finally realized that it wasn't accidental, impulsive, or an overreaction. It was a carefully orchestrated, comprehensive censorship, a network he had designed countless times, now trapping him inside, unable to move. I've always known that public opinion is the sharpest knife of this era. I've held this knife in my hands for years, never daring to use it, but now I feel it's time to sharpen it. The morning after the short video was released, my cloud drive save history showed hundreds of downloads and the comments section exploded. The video title was simple: Husband on a 3-day business trip, but his location was in a maternity ward. Daniel Miller's double life. The cover photo was a blurred picture of a baby stroller with a caption in the lower right corner. 6 people accompanying the baby, excluding the wife. I didn't show my face, only narrated the story, accompanied by a barrage of evidence, location screenshots, wart surveillance footage, visiting videos, household registration cancellation documents, insurance beneficiary changes, hospital discharge records. Every frame was authentic. Every word was sharp and incisive. The video garnered over 100,000 shares within a day. The comment section was even more heated than I expected. This is outrageous. The whole family is there to support the mistress's childbirth while the wife stays home taking care of her granddaughter. The mother-in-law is a cancer. 2. She helps cover up her son's infidelity. Who is family here? The female protagonist is ruthless and decisive, handling the entire legal process for revenge. I'm copying her. From now on, I'm going to send this video to all my friends. Don't be like Daniel Miller. The top comment was from a female user. In reality, we are all Eleanor, but few have her courage and clarity. Thank you for standing up for us. I looked at the screen, my eyes welling up, not because I felt wronged, but because finally someone was listening to me. The world is finally not just filled with voices like, "Are you being too sensitive?" and "Don't let your family make things too ugly." At noon, the Miller family's group chat fell completely silent. My cousin-in-law, who usually loved posting health recipes, didn't say a word all day. My cousin, who used to remind me to keep an eye on your daughter, changed the group name to Family Address Book and even changed her profile picture to a white flower. The patriarch of the Miller family, Margaret's uncle, posted too much stuff lately, temporarily leaving the group, and then he really left. I could even imagine them discussing what to do in their own little groups. But that didn't matter anymore. They never considered me part of the Miller family in the first place. So, why should I care whether the people behind that surname still considered me family? At 2:00 p.m., Margaret called. I answered but didn't speak. Eleanor, could you delete the video you posted? Her voice was a little weak, but still carried a hint of command. I finally spoke, my tone calm. Why? You know, things have already come to this point, and continuing this fuss won't be good for anyone. I smiled faintly. For everyone. Who are everyone? Is it your grandson or that husband who isn't my husband? He hesitated for a few seconds, then changed his approach. Those things you posted, we were indeed wrong. I also bear responsibility. I apologize to you now. Isn't that enough? Apologize, I repeated softly. Do you deserve it? He was silent. I continued, you're not my mother. From the moment you stood next to that woman, you weren't. Eleanor. Her voice rose as if she were about to cry. I hung up the phone, decisively. It wasn't that I was heartless. It was that he had never shown me any kindness. In the evening, the bank called. Hello. Is this Ms. Williams? While investigating Ms. Margaret Miller's pension account, we discovered several large, unusual transfers. We have already submitted a freeze application. I calmly replied, I need any documents. Not for now. But if it involves jointly owned property or family trust structures, we may contact you again. Okay. I hung up. I recalled the CCTV footage the property management sent that day. Margaret standing alone at the gate, crying and making a scene at the security guard, only to be politely asked to leave. At that moment, I truly felt that justice, though perhaps slow, would eventually come. At 10 p.m., Jenna came out of her room holding a tablet. Mom, look. He handed me a screenshot. It was a WeChat Moments post from Miller's relatives, their profile pictures turning gray one after another. The Miller family daily life, where the family used to interact and like posts frequently, was now almost deserted. Group announcements had also been quietly removed. My aunt deleted Dad from WeChat. My second uncle blocked him, and even my sister-in-law said in the group, don't contact me lately. I'm afraid it will affect my child's civil service exam. I smiled at him, that's good. They're scared now. He frowned. It's not fear. It's that they finally realized I won't cover for them anymore. That morning, I received a forwarded email from attorney Jason with only 5 words in the title. Clearance begins. I opened it. It contained the minutes of the extraordinary board meeting of Daniel Miller's company. The meeting only had one item on the agenda, a vote on the proposal to remove Daniel Miller from his positions as director and CEO. I wasn't surprised. This day was bound to come sooner or later. According to Jason, the person who made the move was Daniel's old rival and former partner. Daniel's company, which he founded, had been launched with Jason's investment in its early stages. Their relationship soured later, resulting in a seemingly amicable split, but in reality, they were bitter enemies. However, in recent years, Daniel, confident in his success, refused to compromise even on basic profit sharing. His rival was simply waiting for an excuse. 3 days after the video surfaced, media headlines trended. Daniel Miller's maternity leave scandal continues to escalate. Internal power struggles among executives suspected to be intensifying. In the business world, private life is never truly private, especially when your public image is built on labels like successful man and good family husband. Once shattered, it's devastating. He tried to stabilize the situation. but the board convened unexpectedly without informing anyone. By the time he realized what was happening, the internal vote had already ended. 8 votes in favor, 1 abstention. He was ousted. Even the notification letter was forwarded to the company email by his secretary brief. Cold and legal. Meanwhile, my independent trust began its first phase of separation. Lawyers' letters were sent one after another, and all previously jointly managed assets were frozen. Daniel only had one personal account, left with a balance of less than $100,000. The financial firewall I had personally set up was now, like a steel mechanical arm, slowly stripping away all his support. When Jason called me, he was very direct. He can't access the money, sign contracts, or sell shares now. He's on his last legs. I leaned against the balcony, sunlight falling on my face, and chuckled softly. Keep that last breath. At the same time, his business reputation had completely collapsed. Several core banks sent risk warning letters, suspending his original credit lines. Partners avoided him one by one, and project shareholders began privately discussing emergency plans to divest their Miller shares. Miller Technology, which he was once so proud of, had now become a high-risk target for negative public opinion. The entire industry knew he was finished. Meanwhile, his mistress couldn't sit still either. Serena made several phone calls, her tone shifting from anxious to hysterical. Didn't you say the child could be registered? Now we can't even get the household registration done. The hospital says the system can't find the spouse's information and the child's father's column is empty. Daniel initially thought it was just a procedural issue, so he went to the local street office himself only to be given a piece of paper by the staff. Birth registration failed. Spouse's identity cannot be verified. He then realized that the household registration system had already cleared all his family data on the day Eleanor disappeared. The name Daniel Miller was also completely removed from all the columns for husband, head of household, and caregiver. He cursed under his breath. How much preparation did he make beforehand? No one answered him. That evening, the Miller family held a family meeting, not at the villa, but at his cousin's house where Margaret was temporarily staying. Only Margaret, her sister-in-law Kevin, and Daniel were present. Mom, she can lead the household registration and the property is gone too. You have to think of a solution. For the first time, he lost his composure, spreading his hands. Margaret didn't respond. He had just received a notice from the bank that his pension account had been frozen. The reason not related to a family trust dispute. What he didn't know was that I had already made provisions for traceability of gifts in that trust document. If the other party defaulted and transferred the funds, I had the right to recover them. A layer of weariness, impossible to shake off, appeared on his face. Kevin leaned back on the sofa, his face full of disdain. I told you long ago you weren't someone to be trifled with, but you insisted on putting on an act with the whole family. Daniel turned around. Shut up. Now you know to shut up. Kevin sneered when you were hooking up with Serena behind his back. Didn't you think about the consequences? You even dragged the whole family into it. He was speechless. Kevin stood up, grabbed his bag. Fine. I don't care about you anymore. I wish I could remove you from my list of relatives. Anyone who gets involved with you is doomed. Bang. The door slammed shut with a deafening crash. Margaret finally spoke. Are you really that useless? Can't even handle one wife. He's crazy. He's a lunatic. Daniel roared. How was I supposed to know he was doing this behind my back? Don't forget, you cheated on me first. You took us to the delivery, and now you're blaming him for turning against you. Margaret was furious, too. Do you think you're still some kind of golden brand? You're a cancer now. Daniel slammed his fist on the coffee table, cracking the glass. No one dared to utter a sound. The room was deathly silent. He slowly sat down, looking like he had aged 10 years. That night, his hair turned completely white. I sat at home listening to the argument coming from the recorder. Yes, I had someone record this family meeting. Now, I've put this audio in a new folder named the Miller Family Self-Destruct List. I had just returned from the gym, and before I even put the key in the lock, I heard someone knocking on the door. It wasn't hurried, but rather slow, deliberate cadence, like a deliberately lowered decibel, a faint intimacy. I unlocked the door. Margaret stood in the doorway. She wore a gray-blue wool coat, her face feed kindness, holding a plastic lunchbox that emitted a faint steam. Eleanor. Her voice was soft, as if she were rehearsing a draft. I made your favorite yam and longing cake. Steamed it for 2 hours. I didn't reach out to take it, nor did I speak. She wasn't flustered. Instead, she smiled and lowered her head as if saying something to soothe the child. Your father has only ever considered you as his wife these past 2 years. Our whole family knows you're the Miller family's lucky star. I finally spoke. Please take this snack to jail. His smile froze on his face, his cheeks trembling slightly. You. How could you say that? He tried to feign a wrong tone. Mrs. Miller. Stop acting. I said coldly. The only thing you can do now is go back to your son and discuss how to respond to the lawsuit. Don't come to my door pretending to be kind. I raised my hand to close the door. He suddenly stuck his foot through the crack. Eleanor. His voice rose. Are you really going to kill me? I looked at his foot and calmly repeated. You stepped on my carpet. He finally pulled his foot back. Don't go too far. His eyes finally showed real emotion. You're a woman. My daughter-in-law. Part of the Miller family. I interrupted him directly. I'm not anymore. From the moment you tacitly approved of Serena entering the postpartum care center, I wasn't. I didn't say anything more, and the door slammed shut. Several neighbors stood outside the window, whispering among themselves on the steps below. I heard a girl say, "Oh, Aunt Williams did the right thing. What's the point of keeping a mother-in-law like that?" Another boy whispered in agreement. She conceived a child with her husband's mistress and still tries to play the family card. Does she think we're stupid? I didn't turn around, but the voices were louder than applause. Within 10 minutes, screenshots from the neighborhood group chat reached me. Old Ms. Miller went to beg for reconciliation, but was rejected. Aunt William stood firm at her door, and the neighbors watched and applauded. Someone took a picture of her standing at the door with her head down, and someone else took a picture of her face turning pale and then red as the neighbors gossiped. The story spread. Janice showed me her phone, laughing. You've become the neighborhood role model. I nodded. I just didn't want to put up with this anymore. In the evening, my sister-in-law, Kevin, also arrived. She came aggressively, pushing through the crowd and rushing towards my door. Eleanor, are you smug? You made my mother so angry. Do you even deserve to be called a human being? I didn't respond to him. His voice grew increasingly shrill. You, a former daughter-in-law, are meddling in our family affairs. Who do you think you are? I looked at him, neither angry nor amused. Who I am is unimportant. Who's left in your family? His expression changed. I continued. The company went bankrupt. Your household registration is gone. Your grandson can't be registered and your assets are frozen. Ask your mother if she regrets kicking me off the Miller family's doorstep back then. Kevin suddenly reaned his eyes, pointing at his mother and yelling, "It's all your fault you spoiled this grandson, and our whole family got dragged down with you. Are you satisfied now?" After he finished speaking, he turned and left, leaving Margaret standing alone. Staggering back a step, he shook his head, seemingly wanting to speak, but he couldn't even stand steadily. The next second, his body swayed and he fell heavily to the ground. I stood in the living room and calmly dialed 120. The operator asked, "Patient's relationship." I said, "Former mother-in-law. Are you willing to sign?" I looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar face outside the window and answered, "No. I'm no longer his immediate family." The ambulance arrived and 2 paramedics lifted him up. He had regained consciousness. Eleanor. He weakly called to me that I didn't move. "Nya. Do you really hate me that much?" Her eyes were glistening with tears. I looked at her. "You're not my mother, and I don't hate you. It's just that you're no longer worth my pity. That night, I received a link from a short video blogger titled Mrs. Miller Refuses Mother-in-Law's Plea for Reconciliation at the Door. Refuses to sign scene exposed. In the video, Margaret lay on a stretcher begging for my forgiveness. I stood on the porch. Come? And the words I uttered were prominently featured in the headline. I'm no longer her daughter-in-law. I can't sign this. The comments section exploded again. This scene was so satisfying. She deserved it. How many women in reality are morally blackmailed by their mothers-in-law? Aunt Williams really did what we dare not do. It brought tears to my eyes. She's not cold-blooded. She's finally living for herself. Please, Aunt Williams, publish a book. I'll learn from you on my knees. Sometimes fate doesn't need you to push it. Just wait for it to collapse on its own. I sat in my study. News headlines scrolling across my computer screen. Daniel Miller's rumored lover. Serena Johnson is now embroiled in a legal battle. Abandoned, childless, and without status. Serena Johnson files civil lawsuit. Lawyer responds. The two were not legally married and do not have joint property rights. These few lines felt like needles pricking my eyes. Not at me, but at the woman who thought she had won. She finally began to realize that the so-called happiness was just an empty promise from Daniel's mouth. Jason told me he went to the law firm early that morning, carrying a bunch of photos and recordings. He sat before the lawyer, trembling with emotion. He promised me he'd divorce me after the child was born. I have screenshots of the house, shares, and trust, but none of that has any legal effect. The lawyer calmly replied, "What about me? I had his child and I got nothing. You have no marital relationship, and this child won't give you a single extra penny." He was stunned. He had tried so hard to force his way into that marriage, but faced with the law, he found he couldn't even open the door. Later that afternoon, news came that he had taken the child to the police station to register the household registration, only to be told it was impossible. Mother's information can be recorded. Father's information verification failed. The staff patiently explained, "Our system shows that Mr. Daniel Miller's current marital status is divorced, but there is currently no record associated with you." He froze, his breath catching in his throat for a few seconds. Didn't he say the child could be included in the family tree? The staff member looked up at him. "The family tree isn't a legal document, ma'am. We only look at legal registrations here." His fingers trembled and the baby bottle fell to the ground. Milk stains splattering all over his shoes. That was the first time he lost control in public. Crying hysterically, shouting brokenly. He said he'd give me a title. He said I was Mrs. Miller, but his cries couldn't carry. The police station doors were thick and soundproof. He thought the world was indifferent, but it was just a dream he woke up from too late. That evening, I was making tea when Jenna walked in from the living room, phone in hand. "Mom, people are criticizing him online." I opened the screen. His name was trending with the keywords Serena Johnson's affair truth. Miller family's childbirth scandal female protagonist crashes online. Some netizens dug up old photos of her and Daniel, while others unearthed his fake academic certificate from his early brand endorsements. The cruelest thing was an old interview clip where he proudly smiled and said that I believe in fate and someone is willing to take responsibility for me. Now the comments are unanimously sarcastic. The word fate is now called compensation. Right. Daring to interfere in someone else's marriage and still wanting to be Mrs. Miller. Her acting skills are quite good. The brand has terrible taste. How could they sign someone like this? In less than a day, 3 brands announced the termination of their endorsement contracts, and even his online store was flooded with negative reviews. His fan group was in an uproar. I leaned back on the sofa and gently blew on the steam from my tea. "Is he completely finished this time?" Jenna asked. "Yes." I put down my teacup. He finally knows that what is stolen will never belong to him. At 11 p.m., Daniel called him. The entire call was recorded by his best friend and uploaded online. On the other end of the line, he sounded tired, irritable, and even weary. "Can you please stop making a scene? What am I supposed to do right now? If I don't make a scene, what will happen to the baby? Where am I supposed to take him? You decided to give birth. I didn't force you. You." His voice trailed off, followed by a sharp shattering sound of glass breaking. The recording was later edited into a short video, which garnered over 1 million views. The comments section was overwhelmingly negative. He was no longer seen as a pitiful victim, but as a self-inflicted joke in everyone's eyes. The next day, his nanny called the police, citing postpartum emotional instability and vandalism. When the police arrived, she was sitting on the floor crying and holding her baby, surrounded by broken bottles, torn wedding photos, and an overturned crib. The baby's face was pale from crying, and he was eventually taken away by ambulance, diagnosed with mild dehydration. I remember the headline that day very clearly: Serena Johnson, the woman at the center of the childbirth scandal, suffers emotional breakdown, baby hospitalized. Scandal continues to unfold. I didn't share or like it. I just watched it quietly and then closed my laptop. This drama had finally reached its deserved ending. 2 days later, I accompanied Jenna to the Municipal Women and Children's Hospital to visit a friend, and we happened to pass by the psychiatric ward. Through the glass window, I saw him. He was wearing a hospital gown, his hair disheveled, his eyes vacant, mechanically rocking a stroller. A nurse gently urged him to rest, but he just mechanically repeated, "He promised me he would marry me." Jenna stood beside me, her brow slightly furrowed. "Mom, he looks quite pitiful." I looked at him for a long time, finally uttering only, "He doesn't deserve pity." Jenna turned to look at me, her eyes flashing with complex emotions. I calmly added, "There are many pitiful people, but not everyone uses someone else's happiness as a stepping stone." I stood at the end of the courthouse corridor, my fingers gently stroking a neat stack of documents, a thick stack of evidence I had painstakingly collected over the past few months. Location screenshots, social media records, asset statements, medical discharge records, and even a happy photo with Serena. Jason came over and adjusted my trench coat. "Ready?" I looked up at the courtroom doors across the way. "Ready for a long time," I replied, my tone as cold as the morning frost outside the window. The court session started at 9 a.m. sharp. I walked into the courtroom and sat in the plaintiff's seat facing Daniel. He was wearing a dark gray suit, his face gaunt, looking 10 years older. He was still wearing the watch I had bought for him, its dial chipped, like his marriage cracked, yet trying to appear whole. There were quite a few reporters in the gallery, but their flashes were suppressed as I entered. No one dared to turn them on. Serena did not appear in court. Her lawyer represented her. He had been forcibly hospitalized for 72 hours for observation, just in time for the restriction period. The judge flipped through the documents page by page, giving me a scrutinizing look. Then, turning to Daniel, "Ms. Williams, is it true that you formally request the dissolution of your marriage with Mr. Daniel Miller and to file a charge of bigamy as an adjunct?" "Yes," I replied, my voice not loud, but clearly echoing in the microphone. "Mr. Miller, do you object to the divorce?" Daniel's voice was Hersero. "I do not agree to the divorce. I am willing to compensate for the emotional damage I have caused, and I can give up more shares. But I do not want it to end like this." Before he finished speaking, I laughed. It was very soft, almost cold, yet it plunged the entire courtroom into a suffocating silence. "Mr. Miller," I slowly began, "do you think marriage is a stock swap? After compensating for emotional damage, we can go back to the way things were." He didn't speak. His brow twitched slightly. "You don't want it to end." I continued, "Then let me tell you, we are over. From the moment you first lied." The trial lasted 2 hours with ample evidence from both sides and a brisk pace. The moment the gavel struck, I felt like I had finally surfaced from a long dive, taking a deep breath of real air. The judge's tone was unhurried. This court hereby rules as follows. 1. The marriage between Eleanor Williams and Daniel Miller is dissolved. 2. The principal real estate, investment rights, and trust assets acquired during the marriage belong to Ms. Eleanor Williams. 3. Mr. Daniel Miller's bigamy is established as this is his first offense and his attitude towards admitting guilt is acceptable. He is sentenced to 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and a deadline for rectification. A low murmur rippled through the audience. Some took out their phones to take pictures. Others began to applaud silently. I didn't turn around. I simply stood up slowly and bowed to the judge's bench, not to thank the verdict, but to say goodbye to my past self. Walking out of the courtroom, the sunlight was bright and I squinted. Just as I was about to take a deep breath, someone stopped me. It was a reporter around 30 years old, who handed me a microphone. Ms. Williams, could you say a few words about this trial? The camera was pointed at me, and a crowd gathered around me. I was taken aback, then nodded. Actually, nothing special. I said softly, I just don't want to live in someone else's story anymore. The reporter seemed not to understand. So I added that I'm not the first wife. I'm a free man back at my new home. Jenna opened the door herself. Mom, welcome back. He smiled and placed the keys in my hand. From today onwards, this is our own place. He had applied for the household registration transfer long ago. And today, we stamped the documents together at the civil affairs window. From now on, I no longer belong to the Miller family, no longer bear the name Mrs. Miller. My name is mine alone to decide. I never imagined that, at 55, I could be taken away like a young girl going on a spontaneous trip. Mom, let's go. Jenna smiled at me in the airport lobby, her face showing a long-lost lightness. Where to? To a place you've never even imagined in your life. He didn't say where. He just gave me a boarding pass, holding the ticket with Lazagonger Airport printed on it. I stared blankly for a long time before realizing I was really going to Tibet. On the day of landing, the sunlight was clear, the air thinner than I had imagined, but my heart felt lighter than in the city. We stayed in a lakeside guest house, every window facing the waters of Yamrock Lake. I sat on the balcony, and Jenna brewed 2 pots of pour tea, handing me a cup. Didn't you always say you wanted to come when you were young? I took the tea, my fingers trembling slightly. Yes, I thought about it back then. Your dad said he'd take me here for our honeymoon, but then your grandma broke her leg, so we couldn't go. I took a small sip and suddenly smiled. Then every year we said we'd go, but someone always got sick. Work was busy. The company was busy after that. You stopped saying it right. Jenna softly replied. Back then, I really thought everything should go first. The next afternoon, Jenna dragged me into a ridiculously expensive clothing store. At first, I tried to refuse. Don't waste your money. I can't pull off these clothes. Mom, if you say you can't pull off these clothes again, I'll swipe my card for 3 items right now. I glared at him, and he actually raised his card, ready to get serious. Finally, I gave in and picked out a navy blue velvet dress to try on. Standing in front of the mirror, I froze. The sales assistant came over, his eyes darting back and forth between me and the dress, saying, "This style is suitable for a younger figure. You have a good presence." But before he could finish, Jenna looked up and said, "Are you implying my mother isn't good enough?" The sales assistant was speechless for a moment, trying to smooth things over with a smile. But Jenna interrupted him with, "Please be professional." At that moment, for the first time, I felt someone say no. For me, the feeling wasn't just warm. It almost made me want to cry. Mom, you can afford this dress, and you can pull it off. Jenna stood behind me, her voice resolute. I looked at the unfamiliar, yet elegant reflection in the mirror and nodded. Then let's buy it. I said it with unprecedented decisiveness, walking along Barker Street. The warm sunlight shone on my face that day. Jenna and I bought scarves, Tibetan incense, and a Tibetan silver bracelet. I sat in the courtyard of a tea house, watching him smile as he took photos, when suddenly I heard someone call my name. Eleanor. I turned around and saw it was Sister Tao, a former colleague. She was in Tibet with a tour group and was stunned when she saw me. You have a completely different aura now. She looked me up and down. You're living such a high-ass life now. I smiled. My daughter brought me on this trip. Sister Tao teased. You're living more freely than us ordinary women now. Wasn't your husband? I heard some rumors about him before. What happened? I smiled gently. It's all over. The verdict has been handed down. Wow, that's amazing. I wish I were half as decisive as you. He sighed. I didn't say anything more, just lowered my head and drank my tea. The sunlight shone on the tea, making my heart soften. After dinner, we took a walk by the lake, and I suddenly asked Jenna, when you were little, did you think I was a good mother? She paused, then looked at me seriously. When I was little, I thought you were Superman. Later, when I grew up, I knew you weren't, but I admired you even more. My throat tightened. Actually, you didn't really live before, really. He sighed. You took too much care of others. Too much care of your family, but you never took care of yourself. I nodded, but I didn't feel any guilt or regret, and now I asked him, am I acting like a human being now? He gently hugged me. Now, you are the mother I am truly proud of. My hand landed on his back, and suddenly I felt that life is so long, and to finally receive a sincere word is worthwhile. I got out of the taxi and stood downstairs at the apartment building, looking up at the entire glass curtain wall. It was like a giant mirror reflecting my current appearance. No longer Mrs. Miller, nor anyone's shadow. The building manager helped me carry my luggage upstairs. I swiped my newly issued magnetic card to open the door, and a faint scent of wood and freshly installed carpet wafted out. 3 bedrooms, 1 living room, enough for 1 person and 1 cat. The balcony was spacious. I set up a small wooden shelf in the corner, planning to buy a few potted roses to plant tomorrow. Outside the window was the city night view, brightly lit yet quieter than before. I closed the door, leaving only the sound of my footsteps inside. This quiet, which I used to dread, now felt incredibly comfortable. The next morning, sunlight streamed in through the gaps in the curtains. I nestled on the sofa, drinking tea. The first rose bush on the windows sill has been planted. I picked it out at the flower market, and it's named Moon Shadow. As I knelt down to loosen the soil, a neighbor passed by and said with a smile, Auntie, you really know how to live. I looked up at him. He was young and handsome with short, neat hair and a 4 or 5-year-old daughter following behind. I smiled and said, I'm getting older, and I'm only just starting to learn. He nodded. The earlier the better. My mom didn't decide to divorce until she was 50, and afterward, she dressed better than me every day. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Your mom is so cute. After she walked away, I looked back at the rose bush and noticed that it wasn't blooming spectacularly, but it was tenacious. A breeze blew and the leaves swayed slightly, as if nodding at me. Around 3 p.m., the phone rang. I didn't have the number saved, but I knew him all too well. Daniel. I stared at the screen. The phone vibrated repeatedly, like a drowning person struggling. I pressed the answer button without putting it on speakerphone. Eleanor. Her voice was as low as ever, but with a long-lost weariness. Can we have a proper talk? I didn't speak. I don't want you to forgive me. He paused. I just want to know if it's possible for us to continue seeing each other as friends. Jen is grown up and I were not young anymore. I smiled softly. Daniel, do you really think we need the friendship label to maintain anything between us? He was silent. You say we're not young anymore. Then you should understand even more that some things that need to be said, things that are useful, I've heard 1,000 times already. After I finished speaking, I hung up without waiting for his reply. The phone screen went black. I switched it to airplane mode and tucked it into the sofa cushions. No blocking, no revenge, no looking back. I simply chose not to let the past interfere with my present. That night, I pulled out that thick old diary from the bookshelf. I started writing it when I first married into the Miller family. The first page read, I want to be a good wife who satisfies my in laws. At that time, I truly believed that as long as I was considerate, tolerant, and devoted enough, I could hold a family together. But as I flipped through the whole book, the most frequent entries weren't about happiness, but about endurance. I turned to the last page, which I had written just a few days ago. I will no longer myself. I used a black fountain pen, the handwriting clear, like some kind of vow. It wasn't an end nor a beginning, but the true middle of my life, not for anyone, nor expected by anyone. I closed the notebook and put it in the drawer, not to seal it away, but to commemorate it. Dinner was simple white rice, chicken stew with mushrooms, and fried broccoli. I made it all myself. I put the dishes into shallow porcelain bowls, laid them on the table, and ate slowly, watching the raindrops swirl on the glass outside. There was no extra sound in the house, only the crisp echo of chopsticks touching the rim of the bowl. When eating, I no longer worried about whether anyone liked the food or not, nor did I need to check Miller's allergy recipes beforehand. I could finally cook a proper meal for myself. It wasn't a task, not an obligation, but a choice. I ate slowly, not wasting even the last drop of soup. It wasn't about saving money, but respecting the food I had prepared, living life earnestly. After dinner, I leaned back in the chair by the window with the orange tabby cat I just adopted, named Milk Bean, at my feet. It was fast asleep, its little belly rising and falling gently as if breathing for me. I gently stroked its head, and as my fingers paused, a sentence suddenly popped into my head. I, Eleanor Williams, am fine alone. I didn't say it aloud, nor did I write it down. I just kept it in my heart, repeating it silently over and over. This sentence wasn't the end. It was my declaration for the second half of this chapter.